there have been some silver linings to COVID, believe it or not. Um, People around the world left their jobs to start new businesses, working remotely, which at least here in the US, for employees to work remotely was always something very largely frowned upon by corporate America, especially when people with disabilities were trying to obtain jobs. But what did COVID teach us? That working remotely is possible and it is productive. So, frankly, there should be no excuse for people with disabilities to be turned away for working remotely, which is a job accommodation, by the way, and should be considered and should be done. So it's in that I see a silver lining that we have shown that working remotely is possible. Health and safety protocols were updated and improved as a result of the pandemic, and we continue to do that. And vaccinations have shown to be fast tracked. The travel and hospitality industries improve the way that they serve their customers. Many outdoor areas, all the downside of that is while people were moving their outside, their dining areas to the outside, many of those areas were not accessible. So we really do have to pay attention to that as we move forward. As we move to slide 6, if folks are seeing slide 6, there are many things that need to happen before we can realize a rebound and a boost or a return to what was the old normal as far as a surge and things that will happen in the travel industry. And we have to really take a close look at, are cities prepared? Are cities friendly for people with disabilities? It's more than just a ramp. We have to talk about inclusion. We have to talk about support services. We have to talk about information, safety and enforcement, and other things that we need to consider. So we go to the slide where we talk about inclusion. People with disabilities must be included, as has been stated earlier, in their strategic discussions, the planning, the design, the implementation, and the oversight of everything that benefits all people, especially when it comes to travel and tourism. We can't be the objects of your decisions. We have to be part of the decision-making process. That's the only way it's going to work. The public and private sectors, transportation services, and general business must have proper standardized training in disability etiquette. We can no longer say that we're going to do it and then not do it. And we can't afford to claim that we're the best when we're not. We have to have standardized training in order to effectively and efficiently work with people with disabilities if we're to expect a really impactful rebound and a boost back to the travel and tourism industry. People with disabilities must be visible in the public, to the public and senior levels of companies and as business owners, included in the news and advertisements that we see on all forms of media, and also their stories included in the media. The more visible and the more included that people with disabilities are, the more normalized we become. And ultimately, we just are. We're not considered as the others. In other words, in order for travel and tourism to survive and thrive, people with disabilities must be engaged and included at all levels. We're not the objects. Again, we're not the objects of those decisions. We are the largest demographic minority in the world, and we have a voice and we have buying power. Let's talk about support services for a second. In order for travel and tourism to rebound, there must be direct access to phone numbers to call for assistance for people with disabilities. Free and available Wi-Fi services, which are needed not only for directions and information, but in case of emergencies. Readily available and affordable travel, nurse caregivers services, personal care, feeding, for bathing, medical equipment, assistive device rentals and repair services. On a recent trip to Dubai, I actually had a flat tire on my wheelchair, but unfortunately, I was not able to find a service available to repair medical equipment. So luckily, I was able to take a cab, a taxi to a bike shop in downtown Dubai, who was able to repair my flat tire. There are great companies out there that provide all kinds of different services. For example, our travel company, Travel for All, works with a network of more than 1,000 partners around the world to provide personal services such as caregiving, oxygen, accessible transportation, dialysis, wheelchairs, sign language interpreters, and so on. This is in addition to booking your cruise tickets or your airfare, your hotel, and many others, such as Sachar Hillel at Easy for You in Israel, who has a medical equipment sales and rental company, or Eli Miri, who owns Accessible Tourism Israel and is a fabulous guide and historian for anyone visiting Israel, especially people with disabilities. Or Dr. Jennifer Kamali, who owns JW Digital Inclusion, who provides services to make digital interfaces accessible. Remember, your website is no good to people with disabilities unless it's fully accessible. One of the hotels that I've encountered as the most inclusive and accessible so far is called the Brooklyn, and it's in the UK. If we go to slide 9, and we talk about information, in addition to digital formats, we must have printed guides describing the cities, the buildings, transportation, tourist information, tourist attractions, including in Braille. Signage on streets, paths, buildings, and vehicles all must be accessible for people with disabilities. And remember, we'll go back to websites that are accessible and include details about the accessibility of or not of the point of interest. Digital applications for electronic devices, monikers on buildings, designating which is accessible. Information on broadcast media. Digital applications such as Danny Weisberg's Voice It. It's a tech startup based in Israel which created some amazing technology that can translate human sounds into understandable language in any language. If we move to the next slide, safety and enforcement, hugely important for a rebound to happen. People with disabilities are the most vulnerable and the most bullied population in the entire world. Laws and penalties must be in place for those who take advantage of people with disabilities, discriminate against us, or violate any law or regulation put in place to protect us. We also need to understand and have information available to us of who and where to contact in case of an emergency. We move to our next slide, and this is the crux of my presentation. What does the future hold for accessible tourism? So it may have been stated earlier that people with disabilities comprise the largest minority in the world. About 1.5 billion people have some type of disability, and that's just the numbers that are reported. That's about 20% of the world's population. If you think about that number and you add another 20% for caregivers and family members, that's about 40% of the world's population that is somehow impacted by disability. And people with disabilities have about 7 trillion, with a T, dollars in disposable income for travel and entertainment, but they're only spending less than half of it. So they're leaving about $4 trillion of disposable income on the table because places either aren't accessible or places that are accessible aren't promoting it. What does that mean? That's a huge business opportunity to make places accessible and adapted for people with disabilities. We go back to this whole concept of universal design. It's imperative that we take this time now, while we have some downtime, before travel and tourism comes back, and make places accessible and adapted for people with disabilities. It's not going to be easy, but we can do it. Businesses will need to continue to innovate. More emphasis needs to be placed on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. You must include and hire people with disabilities in order to remain a competitive business. A lot of businesses talk about sustainable business, sustainability. Well, in order to be sustainable in this day and age, you must include accessible spaces for people with disabilities. We're a growing and aging population. So statistically, almost everyone over the age of 55 will encounter some type of disability during their lifetime. So what does that mean to businesses? If you're not making your place of business, especially in the travel and tourism industry, accessible and adapted for people with disabilities, especially those over age 55, if you're not doing that, eventually you're going to lose that repeat business because as people get older, they're not going to be able to return to your place of business. More assistive technology will be created. We must continue to evolve and innovate in order to remain competitive. Applications and processes such as artificial intelligence and the evolution of autonomy and robotics will have a huge impact on all of us in the next 10 years, with people with disabilities right in the center of all of it. What is the time period for accessible tourism to rebound? Our estimates at Maahs Travels, we're looking at the third quarter of 2022 to have an excellent rebound for travel and tourism for people with disabilities, assuming that we can get the COVID and its variants under control. As long as we continue to make progress in all of the areas that I just mentioned, we can do this. And remember, people with disabilities want to travel. They have money to spend. We want the option to have accessible oceanfront or premium location rooms or a premium seat on a plane. Too often, people with disabilities don't have that option. We're put in the back of the hotel, facing a parking lot. We're put in the back of the plane, when many times we have the money and the funds to purchase those premium rooms or those premium tickets. A little bit about my company. We're here to help. We are uniquely positioned as a leader in the diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility space, including travel and tourism. We have over 40 years of international experience with companies, with corporate and otherwise, nonprofit experience. We work with city planners, government officials, ministries of tourism, corporate leaders, hoteliers around the world, not only to assess and audit what is accessible at your place of business, but to show you how making your place of business accessible and adapted can be inclusive for everyone. And will also help train your employees on how to work with people with disabilities so we can prepare you for that surge, for that rebound that will happen for accessible travel and tourism. Part of my business also is our company at Travel for All. At Travel for All, we work with a number of partners around the world that not only we can book your tickets for air and hotel and cruises, but we can provide all of the services for your personal needs to make sure that your travel experience is inclusive and seamless. And if you need a speaker to come, and I've spoken on many stages around the world about any of these topics or even my personal journey, we can provide that too. So together, we can do this. We're working hard with lots of countries and ministries of tourism around the world to make the world more inclusive, a better place for everyone. We're working with partners that have presented today and many others. The space is large enough for all of us to help and collaborate. And we're here, and we're looking forward to working with you and the rest of the world to make everything better for people with disabilities. Thank you for your time today. I will be available for questions in the session following.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you very much.